Good afternoon and welcome to the Hibs Observer's Tactical Breakdown. We are going to be looking back at Saturday's 2-1 victory over Celtic at Easter Road. Plenty to talk about, plenty to unpack. And joining me as ever is Craig Nisbet. Craig, how are you?
I'm really good. I've been obviously missed the Ayr game and the St Mirren game and come back to that result on Saturday. So, I'm actually very, very happy to be talking about this one.
I know it's becoming a bit of a habit, just this turnaround in the team. There was a time when I kind of feared that you might never get to talk about a Hibs victory, and now it's almost becoming a weekly occurrence. So nice to be able to talk about positive things, nice to be able to talk about different things rather than just focusing on the same mistakes that are, were letting the team down earlier on in the season. So like I was saying, plenty to get through. Two very good goals scored by Hibs to discuss. One goal scored by Celtic. That wasn't great from a Hibs point of view, and the small matter about disallowed goal that I think has prompted a little bit of comment on social media and from Brendan Rodgers in recent days. So we'll get onto that as well as some other moments from the game. First off, just a message for our sponsors. Good Vibes Giveaways, proud to sponsor the Hibs Observer and offer fantastic prizes to fans of the club. Prizes change on a weekly basis and include tech and gadgets, days out, weekends away, tax-free cash, and even Oasis tickets. Get your tickets now at goodvibesgiveaways.com and enter for your chance to spread the good vibes. Plenty of good vibes at Easter Road on Saturday afternoon, Craig. I think we can pretty much just get straight down to business here. I think if we look at the team first of all, not an awful lot of surprises there. Not an awful lot for David Gray to work with. The biggest thing I think was probably Nathan Mariah-Welsh coming back into the starting lineup for the first time since the opening day of the season.
Yeah, I thought that was a massive call. I mean, I suppose a wee bit, I think I said before the game, a little bit out of necessity, I suppose, with Levitt and Kwon, and then obviously Mane being suspended as well. But, has all the right attributes for what was going to be required in that game. And then obviously Kieran Bowie getting the nod up top as well, which it was funny. I was having a conversation with somebody in the morning about it and saying how I sort of felt the Gale, Boyle, Campbell trio had run its course, but I think you could see that there was a need for maybe Kieran Bowie or Kunevich to come in just to offer a physical presence up front. And it was really good to see him start. And I thought what a 60 minutes or so he managed to put in. A really tough game, a physical game. And I know he got, obviously, when he went down, I think heart was in the mouth a little bit, but it looked like cramp, which is a good sign. And obviously, great minutes for him to get under his belt as well, and a really good performance. But no surprises with that setup. And I think the wee tweak that we'll discuss later on, what David Gray did in the midfield with Campbell, Mariah-Welsh and Triantis worked really, really well. And I actually just think our setup in general worked really well against Celtic.
Yeah, you make a good point about Bowie there. Remiss of me not to mention that. I think that the team had been kind of leading into having him start in the game. I think beforehand, I thought it might be a little bit too soon, even though, when he came off the bench against Celtic at the start of the season, you could see that he was quite clearly a handful for the Celtic centre-backs. But I've always kind of thought David Gray would sort of err more on the kind of cautious side rather than sort of pitching somebody in action before they're ready. But by all accounts, from listening to what Kieran Bowie said himself after the game, he was kind of champing at the bit to get back. And as you point out, a very good 60 minutes or so from him. And Hibs are really, I think, just a different beast with him up top. I think you look at what David Gray's got in attack, and it is an embarrassment of riches with everyone fit. With Eli Yuan, I think David Gray said he was 2 minutes away from coming back in his post-match press conference. So a chance of involvement for him on Wednesday night against Dundee United. But with Dwight Gale, with Martin Boyle, with Kieran Bowie, Mikola Kurevich, even sort of Junior Hoylett getting up there as well. There's an awful lot there to choose from. So it's I think we're maybe seeing what we didn't see maybe just a couple of months ago, where it was almost can anyone here play up front, because obviously Kurevich was out, Bowie was still coming back. I think there was a time when Gale was struggling a little bit as well. So it was a bit makeshift for a time, but hopefully this is the start of something good in attack for Hibs. We'll move on to the race chart. I don't think there's anything too surprising here. Possibly the percentage chance of Celtic winning this game if it was played again. But I think maybe based on possession, that's not too surprising.
No, and I think that the chart, it just highlights, and when we played Celtic before, we were a goal down within 5 minutes, and goals change games, as we know. And when we get to discuss the sort of tactical side of things, I'm sure this would have been the plan in the previous 2 games, but just when you concede a goal, it changes things. It changes things a lot. And I just think we got goals at really, really good times early on, and then just into that sort of half time as well. It forced Celtic obviously into a treble change. We knew we were going to be under pressure, but because they had the 2 goals at that point, it was probably not an easy half-time chat for the team, but it would have been like, we just need to maintain what we're doing, keep defending stoically and keep going, and if we can get another chance on the counter-attack, we need to take it, or a set piece. So yeah, I think if we went in at 1-0, I probably would have maybe feared for us a little bit in the second half, but I think that second goal was just massive, and it made all the difference in the end.
We'll come on to the goal shortly, but just before we do, this is the sort of pressure heat map, if you like, from the game, on the basis that Hibs are attacking left to right. So that sort of big high intensity portion is on the Hibs right side. That was something you kind of noticed during the game, I think, just that there was a lot going down that side.
Yeah, it was really interesting, because I thought in the first half that quite a lot of the attacks sort of came down Celtic's right and our left. There was a lot of rotation with Alistair Johnston, McCowan, and in those positions and things like that. So it's really interesting to see. And then I actually thought in the second half, once they put Jota on and moved Maeda into the centre, that a lot of the attacks came down our right hand side. So it kind of flipped a little bit, but I think on that side here with Miller, Mariah Welsh as well, who was absolute as pressing, I thought was outstanding. I think when you messaged earlier, said he had the most pressures.
Yes.
For Hibs. So it kind of, I don't know if it was a case of Hibs forcing Celtic down that side, or trying to keep them away from the right hand side in the early part of the game in the first half. But you can just see by that, like, just how hard, I commented on that during the game as well, just how hard you have to work out of possession to just limit Celtic to the chances, the sort of lesser chances really, that we managed to do in the game. So just like an absolute power of work from the team.
Yeah, I think you could certainly see that with the way some of the players were coming off the pitch if they were being subbed, or even at the end, a lot of players out there who would kind of run themselves into the ground and then some. So moving on to the goals, we'll start with the first 1.5 minutes on the clock here. Talk us through it.
Yeah, so I think I wanted to start off with Rocky, because I think one thing that and he's been playing in that back 3, there's been question marks on his ability on the ball, but in this game as well, and in previous games, he's shown a lot more confidence in carrying the ball forward, and even hitting some switches of play and things like that. And it's a really important thing when we play in that 3, because you can see here he sort of drives out. Adam, he does sort of trying to catch up on the press, but what he's able to do is he drives forward, as he kind of has to make Maeda commit to either closing him down or completely staying towards O'Hora. And as he gets across, like if you go into the next clip, he just pulls Maeda in long enough that he can get the ball to O'Hora. It's a good little pass there, and it gives O'Hora time to kind of look up and not be playing that pass under a lot of pressure. Now obviously O'Hora doesn't have loads of time to eye up a pass, because Maeda is obviously unbelievable at pressing, but that little difference from Rocky there, being able to give O'Hora the ball where O'Hora's then got a bit of time to pick out a pass, I think is really, really important, and it's a bit that Rocky's definitely added to his game. After that, I think we mentioned Bowie at the top of the show. I think this next bit here, just that ball going in from O'Hora into Bowie, just having someone that can hold the ball up there and be a nuisance, is we've just been missing that for a long time. Kurevich has the build for it, but quite often the ball doesn't stick. It's a side of his game. Like he even though he's a bigger player and he likes to run in behind, it's a side of his game he has to improve. And this is what Bowie loves. And you can see even just there, Trusty, obviously his positioning is wild that he's ran that far out. It's a big error on his part, but you can see there's Engels brought in as well. In and around that position, and to try and double up, that gives Bowie a bit of time. And I think as he manages to hold the ball up, he knocks it into Mariah Welsh. And again, you can just see there's Maeda coming back. You've got Engels, you've got Trusty, and suddenly Mariah Welsh is in and on the ball. And actually, I thought he did really well because he sort of just took one touch, and then his second touch was a really nice pass into Triantis in the middle of the park. But of course, as that happens, I think Josh Campbell's eyes light up a little bit here because there's now that big gap in behind Taylor. I think I'd seen on maybe Sports Scene that they were talking about Taylor's positioning. I actually think Lewis Miller deserves a lot of credit because he was high and wide, and that was sort of keeping Greg Taylor out of that position. And we've seen Triantis do this a lot. His dribble forward. He's somebody that, everybody, if you look at that sort of left-hand side, everybody's thinking hit that switch to Nicky Cadden. But Triantis carries the ball, and he just releases it at the right time. And it's such a great weighted pass in for Josh Campbell. And I'd also highlighted Martin Boyle's run there as well, because I think he spins off to go into the channel to keep Carter Vickers occupied. And obviously that means that he can't cover, and it's just a great way to pass in for Josh Campbell. And I have to say, it's a really great finish as well, because huge amount of pressure running in there. We saw Kasper Schmeichel, against Bayern Munich in the week, performing heroics 1v1, and I think it was just a great touch and a really good finish from Josh Campbell, and a really good start. And for someone that obviously looks at the games in a bit of tactical detail, and as sad as I am, like that for me is probably goal of the season for us, because it just has everything I'm sure David Gray wanted from the team in possession, kind of going up and back and through in these runs off. So just the perfect team goal.
Yeah, and I think as well, probably worth pointing out, we started this clip with Rocky taking the ball out of the 18-yard box, and it was 1 minute 30 on the clock. It's now 1 minute 42, and that's the pass being made. And it just kind of shows you just how quick it all happened. And I think, again, you can see this. You can see Taylor trying to get across the cover, Trusty still running back. So just, a really, really well-worked goal, and, good to see Hibs doing what Celtic did to them, I think, 2-3 times already this season. So kind of playing them at their own game and winning.
And it just shows that one side that me and Liam have spoke about a few times, and maybe me and you have as well, that this, we had to the team had to evolve from just getting the ball to Nicky Cadden and hoping he was going to create something. And I think he isn't involved in this move at all. So, it's that showing now with Kieran Bowie in there, that link in the middle. We're able to create goals that in a different way going through the middle, and it's no disrespect to Kurevic or Gale and things like that. I just don't think we score that goal with them there, and even for Campbell as well. There's question mark. I was even questioning his run in the team and wondered if it was maybe time for Hoylett or Molotnikov to come in, especially in possession. But you can see that's what he brings, that running behind, that desire to get in there. And I feel for him because I think a lot of time he has made those runs and just hasn't, the ball hasn't stuck up top. So it's quite an exciting prospect to think of him, Bowie and Boyle working together. Yeah,
definitely. You mentioned the shape just in general a little bit before. I think if we look here, this is sort of 12 minutes in. Hibs' shape was really good, especially throughout the first 45 minutes. Really kind of limited Celtic, and I think just everyone's sticking to their jobs, doing what they needed to do. You've highlighted a lot of things here. There's a lot to talk about. So I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, I'll try and keep it as succinct. I actually tried to add the comments in just so people could kind of pause it and read as they go. But yeah, I mean, what we did normally with the midfield setup is obviously the Triantis and Mariah Welsh, or Triantis and Levitt would just sort of sit as the two, and Campbell would, if a team's got a deeper player, Campbell would go and sort of pick them up, and obviously Mariah Welsh and Triantis or whoever would pick up the opposing 8 and 10 from the midfield of the opposition. But Celtic are a bit of a different animal, so it's quite difficult to do that, and you actually then need sort of your strikers to maybe pick up the number 6. And you need your midfielders to be a little bit flatter just because of the rotation. So you can see here we ended up being a bit more flat with Mariah Welsh, Triantis and Campbell. So Campbell slotted into the sort of left-hand side, Mariah Welsh on the right. And what we tried to do was keep Triantis free so that when the ball switched, he could shuffle across and pick up the spare man. And it would allow Mariah Welsh to press Greg Taylor, which we're seeing on this side, and also Campbell to pressure and try and man mark Alistair Johnson on the other. That leaves Miller able to pick up Maeda, and then on the other side, Nicky Cadden to pick up Kuhn. Where it's really tough doing that, as you can see, like Engels and McCowan, they're trying to pick up those little spaces in there just between the midfielders, far enough away that the defenders won't go into that area to try and get the ball on the half turn and then look to attack us in behind. So it's a really difficult job to do that, and you could even see in the first half how tiring it was for the players. And I do think this is what we tried to do against them previously, but just ended up getting caught out and conceding early. But it worked really, really well. So if you go into the next clip, like in this example, you can see Mariah Welsh pressing. It goes back to Trusty, and obviously you have to sacrifice something. And what Hibs sacrificed was they left Trusty and Carter Vickers on the ball, and between Bowie and Boyle, they just tried to keep as close an eye on Callum McGregor as you can. And listen, he's an excellent player, so he does eventually find space and move into areas that become difficult. But Boyle and Bowie had an important role there as well, because they often went over to double up and to cover and things like that. So they did put a power of work in as well. As it goes across the pitch to the other side, if you go into that next clip, the ball ends up there with Alistair Johnson, and what you can see, Campbell is now closing him down. Boyle's going across to kind of double up, but also just to stop that pass going into McGregor. Bowie's tracking McGregor into the middle, and then you can see just kind of where the referee is in that sort of text box is Triantis is shuffling across into that area where McCowan is now, because Campbell can't pick up McCowan because he's now pressing the fullback, and Mariah Welsh is jogging back inside to pick up Engels. And then on the far side you can see Nicky Cadden kind of looking at Nicholas Kuhn and kind of covering that space, and you can see Iredale there just kind of pointing towards McCowan to Triantis to kind of cover, because he wants to stay in that shape. We don't want him coming out into that area and leaving space in behind, because that's where Ida looks to run. That's where we'll eventually see Alistair Johnson trying to run into that space at points as well. And I've just highlighted that little gap between, because the important thing is Hibs had quite a high line. And in the first half, like, we caught Celtic offside quite a few times, and to catch them offside, you have to have the pressing players have to be pressing effectively, and your defensive players behind them have to be pushing up at the right times, because obviously if you're too deep, you can press as much as you want, but if you're deep, the ball will get in there. So it was a really well organised sort of interactions between the defence and the midfield. If you go into the next clip, this is what happens, and obviously the ball gets to Nicholas Kuhn, and we know 1v1 he's a very, very good player. But what we've got now in this situation is Iredale can go back and cover, Nicky Cadden can go 1v1 out there. You know, we've got two in the middle, so O'Hora can sort of cover Ida, or Rocky can get in that position to maybe block the cross coming in. And then I've just highlighted, you know, Mariah Welsh is a wee bit off Engels in this example here, but he is moving back in. And then you've got Triantis on McCowan. You've got Campbell starting to run with Alistair Johnson as well. And the only time they really created a chance over the top and in behind was just Campbell not managing to track Alistair Johnson, which I think I have maybe in a clip coming up. But just those interactions there, I mean, maybe it's so difficult with the ball going left to right, and Celtic rotating. The organisation, you know, the communication and things like that, it has to be so spot on. And I just thought in that first half especially, and even in the second half as well, I thought we just did it so well. And just defensively, I thought the performance was fantastic. If you go into the next clip, it's just another example, probably highlighting the line a little bit better that we were talking about. So you can see the midfielders line there with Mariah Welsh, Triantis, Campbell. That's Nicky Cadden pushing out to press Nicholas Kuhn, and then you can see O'Hora, Rocky, and Iredale in that position there. And you can see just they've got such a high line. McCowan's about to make that run off, but because Nicholas Kuhn comes inside, it ends up going across a ball over the top to Ida, but he ends up it goes straight through to Smith. So you can see that we were forcing Celtic into these really difficult sort of clipped through passes in behind. And if you go into the next clip, this is the one time really I think in the first half they exploited it, is that we're actually in a decent enough shape, but what they do is McCowan now pulls out way onto the far side. Alistair Johnson plays out to him, so Nicky Cadden's now out there. Nicholas Kuhn's come inside and runs into the corner, and that pulls Jack Iredale out. And actually after Alistair Johnson plays that pass to McCowan. He makes that run just where that red arrow's going in there, and that's the one McCowan clips it over the top, and it just evades Jack Iredale and forces Smith into a really good save at the near post. And actually, it was funny because I was obviously watching and taking notes that was going on, and I could see like the amount of running Josh Campbell had to do in that first half. Not just attacking wise, but defensively and covering Alistair Johnson. I mean, Alistair Johnson was just relentless. And I think Campbell, even though he gets caught here, did a brilliant job against them, because I think it's a very different prospect marking Greg Taylor in a game like this and Alistair Johnson. So no, overall, I just thought all the players first and second half, like they needed huge amount of credit for that, because it's such a difficult thing to do.
Yeah, I just wanted to take you back to, you mentioned how, Bowie and Boyle were kind of trying to keep Callum McGregor quiet. I think we saw that last season on occasion, I think, under Nick Montgomery, when I think it was Dylan Venti was deployed almost as a kind of auxiliary central midfielder purely to sit on McGregor for the entire time he was on the pitch. And it's, you rightly point out, McGregor, a fantastic player, very much kind of Celtic's metronome, help, sort of making things tick in midfield. And I think we've seen plenty of games between the two teams in the past, where he's maybe been given a bit more freedom, and Hibs haven't really been able to, I kind of suppose, get to grips with that. So it's interesting just that that was one method last season of trying to gain the upper hand in a game. I think that ended in a goalless draw at Easter Road. And I think Venti, although we would have wanted to see him playing as a sort of out and out centre forward, he did a very good job just kind of tracking McGregor throughout the game. And then I think we saw again, very good work from centre forwards in keeping McGregor quiet, just in a slightly different way. And I think what we're seeing, you talk about the shape, you talk about the so disciplined, but I think that's one of the things we talk about, the turnaround that Hibs have performed in the last sort of 2 to 3 months, and just how sort of like how better they're playing just in general. But I think the sort of discipline and the ability to change it up in different types of games against different types of teams and players is, I think it's quite impressive. When you look at, finding a way to win, you think about the cup game away to Ayr, even last week against St Mirren, not a great pitch, down to 10 men, and sort of managing to hold on for a point, that sort of thing. And then obviously here as well, this game where they were kind of under the cosh a little bit, but did manage to, see it out in the end. But I think it's interesting you point out what Bowie and Boyle are doing, and it's just, it's night and day really from the start of the season, isn't it?
To beat Celtic, you can't. Yeah, it's a team. It's a total team effort to get these results over the line, and I think everybody's involved in that in terms of doing their jobs. And if somebody doesn't do it or slips up at one moment, that's where you get punished, especially against the better teams. And yeah, you're right to point out the squad as well, because Bowie's making I think it's his first start. That was his first start. So first start, and then in the midfield you've got Mariah Welsh, who is I think I tweeted that he's played a lot of minutes internationally, but for us it's 70 minutes was the last time he did that, was the opening day of the season when we got beat off St Mirren. And then even Miller coming back in as well, he's been out for the team for a bit, and then he comes back in. So we had 3 changes as well, right down sort of in the spine and the wide areas and up top, that also adds a little bit to it as well. So the fact these guys are able to come in, it just shows you that obviously there's a lot of work being done on the training pitch, and yeah, that's like the perfect execution of the game plan. And as I said, I do think, having done these videos before I get for games against Celtic, I know that this was probably the plan. But if you concede after a couple of minutes, it's very difficult, then, because you're kind of having to chase the game and get a goal a little bit. So it was just great to see it executed so well.
Indeed. This is first half injury time. This is the lead up to the second goal. Felt like a really important time, to score, because I think, Hibs had chances after they went 1-0 up. I think Kieran Bowie had an effort that was, well saved by Kasper Schmeichel. I think Josh Campbell had a header maybe off the bar that was, I think he might be flagged for offside. But it did feel a little bit, you could see the possession stats even at that point. Celtic were getting a lot of the ball. Hibs were kind of content to soak it up a little bit. But this was another really well worked goal, and it owes a lot to Josh Campbell again, doesn't it?
Yeah, it comes from a long throw, and it's sort of kind of Bowie again, like to, I'm going to keep bigging him up, but he's sort of, again, that presence in there, it just sort of makes the ball sort of bounce around a little bit, and Celtic kind of fumble the clearance. And, started off here because I think, it's a first time ball from Iredale. It's a really great sort of way to pass. Just first time that he plays out towards Nicky Cadden. And yeah, if you go into the next clip, he actually Alistair Johnson actually sort of overcommits a little bit, and allows Nicky Cadden to just dribble inside. I think they're thinking the ball's going to go to Boyle, so there's quite a lot of Celtic kind of have the hands up and then they sort of stop a little bit. I don't know if that just disrupts it, but Nicky Cadden drifts inside. If you go into that next clip, and he just slips the ball into Martin Boyle here. And it's funny, I've watched the goal because I seen after the game Josh Campbell said, I knew I was onside. I'm kind of going to disagree with him because he's only really looking at Carter Vickers where he's offside. But I think for Celtic organisationally, I think between Trusty and Carter Vickers, Adam Ida's in there not really doing anything, and Greg Taylor's sort of at the edge of the box again, not really doing anything. So as the ball goes out to Boyle, and he cuts inside, it's a good delivery in terms of there, but it's quite a floated delivery in. There's not a lot of pace on the ball, and it kind of gets hung up in the air a little bit. I think, again, Bowie just manages as he's on Trusty and kind of keeping him in there, and you can see Campbell kind of making that movement. And between Carter Vickers, Taylor and Ida, just nobody picks him up. And, again, we've got to give Josh Campbell a lot of credit because in that final clip, I've tried to just highlight, like, the ball, it's as I said, it's that fluid ball. That's just it. That's where he ends up making contact with it, just where the arrow is there. You can see Trusty's all dropped back a little bit. He's clearly onside. And it's a really good bit of movement in the box, but even then he's not done yet because as he makes contact with the ball just in that final clip, he's under a little bit of pressure coming back in, and from Trusty, and the fact that he's able to get the connection he does because Trusty's quite a tall player coming in, it's a great connection he gets on it, and he actually obviously kind of guides it into that far corner. And like we spoke about his aerial ability a lot on the show and stuff, but I just think that's just like one of the best headers I think he's done. It's so difficult to do that just under that kind of pressure, especially with Trusty coming back in. And as we said at the top of the show, just a great time to get that goal as well. And it was kind of nice to get a little double celebrate off it because we all celebrated, then the offside came, then we got to re-celebrate, so that was quite nice as well.
Yeah, I do wonder whether, like, I think you look at Campbell and you don't necessarily think he's going to be that strong in the air. He's not the tallest. I mean, he's not, you wouldn't say he's short, but he's not the tallest. Doesn't really stand out as being particularly, particularly tall, even particularly physical. I mean, he can sort of certainly put himself about a bit, but I think we've seen this even going back to, I think even probably this sort of where things started to turn, the end of November, start of December. There were, I think, 2 or 3 games in a row where Hibs just had this move, which was essentially Jordan Smith kicking it long upfield, and then Campbell's making the first contact. I think that's how the third goal, the equalising goal against Aberdeen in that 3-3 draw came about. It's how they got the goal, I think the equaliser against Aberdeen at Pataudry. We've seen it a few times, and I'm just sort of wondering whether teams are maybe, almost maybe not giving Campbell the respect he deserves and sort of thinking he could be an aerial threat, because we've seen this quite a lot where, I think he wins balls and you think surely he's got no right to win that.
Yeah, and even defensively as well. Like if you watch him at corners, our corners, he's often making first contact with the ball, and he's really crucial for that as well. So yeah, I mean, I think teams should just keep not respecting him for that because it's such a great asset for us to have. And I think, like you're saying, he's not the tallest and stuff, but what he's just got so much desire and hunger to get in the box and to try and make contact, to try and make something happen, even if it's just to knock somebody out of the way to make space for someone else. And you could see that as that ball went to Nicky Cadden out to Boyle, he was like a striker. He was on his toes. You could see he was just looking to get into that area. So it's maybe something that they've worked on, that if Boyle does find himself out in these wide positions, Campbell sort of fills that role as a sort of second striker and is able to attack the box. So no, a fantastic header, and goal at a great time.
Indeed. Moving on, this will be the lead up to Celtic's. Celtic getting a goal back through Days and Maeda. Not a great performance from the Hibs defence for this, but also you could caveat it by saying it was a very weird ball from Hatate. I don't know whether it was intentional. I don't know whether he caught it wrongly or what it was, but watching it at the time and then watching it back, it seems to me that maybe the way he sort of plays the ball forward has kind of caught the defence out. It's confused them a little bit. Because it's unclear whether he's trying to shoot or whether he's trying to sort of play a ball over the top or a bit of both.
I think he was shooting, definitely, having watched it back a few times. I think he was shooting, and he just makes really bad, well, in the end, good for them, but bad contact with it. And you're right, you have to watch the goal. The stills probably won't do it justice, because I watched it back a lot, and it just kind of gets caught in the air a little bit. There's a bit of weird spin on the ball, and it's a tricky one. I mean, to probably give context, obviously Celtic made a triple change at half time, and Jota and Schlupp came on and Hatate, so they almost changed that whole left side and put Maeda through the middle, and that made it a huge shift for Lewis Miller on that side, and Mariah Welsh. It was, they were just trying to get the ball out to Jota and try and work it down that side. So they actually do really well. I thought Lewis Miller did a really good job against them, but at this point he chops back and he cuts inside, and quite often, when you've got a player that does that, everyone kind of drops. The player chops back, and then a clever player like Hatate will just hang back to create that little bit of space. And Jota lays the ball in. It's a decent pace, but as you said, if you go into the next clip, he just sort of sort of hooks it really. But what was interesting, having watched it back, is as soon as he makes contact with it, Maeda is like darting towards the goal. Which probably at the first time seeing made me think, did he mean that to chip it over the top? But there's no way that he meant that. And I don't know at this point. I was actually in my notes wrote to ask you or ask Liam, what do you actually think happened? Because it looks like there's a bit where he thinks that Rocky's maybe going to clear it, then Rocky sort of screens Schlupp, I think, to stop him going in towards the goal. And then he just sort of stays kind of flat-footed, and Maeda just kind of nips in here and just puts it through his legs. And it's such a strange one. It's such a strange goal. I'm not really quite sure what happened. I'm not sure Smith really knows what happened either. But I think
I think a combination. I think the way it bounces. I mean, obviously we've got still images. We can't really tell that, but I think the way it bounced possibly caught out the defence a little bit. I think also just Maeda's pace. We know how fast he is. You pointed out as soon as Hatate hits it, and you're right. I mean, you look at that first image there. We go back to that. That looks like a shot from there. The still image, like the box there in front of the D. That's Hatate. It looks like a shot, and obviously he's not caught it brilliantly. But I think either the defence maybe thinks it's going wide, it's going over, or it's just going to be an easy sort of pluck out there for Smith. But I think Maeda's pace is something that he utilizes so well. Especially when he's playing through the middle. I mean, out wides, fair enough, but certainly through the middle, it can be the difference sometimes. And I think if the defense is just a little bit sluggish, or if as you pointed out, Rocky's trying to screen Schlupp there, then I think it's left a bit of space, and I think it just looks like quicker reactions to me. And I think Smith's maybe kind of underestimated the danger. Maybe thinks it's going to be like an easy claim, and then obviously Maeda's nipped in there, just reacted quickest. So not great, but I mean, the caveat that it's a very strange setup, a very strange situation.
Yeah, a really strange goal. I wasn't actually sure if Smith had saw Maeda, just out of there, because he would have been looking at the shot from Hatate. It would have, balled up into the air. He's maybe kind of looking at the ball to try and work out where it's going to go, and Maeda's just nipped in. Is the other way I kind of thought it maybe panned out a little bit. But we talked about the Alistair Johnson chance in the first half, and then obviously I think there was another chance where in the first half Nicholas Kuhn hit a sort of cross shot that Smith sort of parried away. But aside from that, really there wasn't too much for him to really get involved with. He came for a couple of crosses, punched a few away and things like that. So we did limit them, but this is it. Like you said there, is that if they even get half a chance, they can strike. And especially once they moved, I thought Adam Maeda was extremely poor in the game, and I think putting Maeda through the middle just made it a little bit more tricky, because you just had another person that was just looking to run off you. And again, I thought the defence deserved a lot of credit for how they managed that in the second half, because as the game wore on as well, that's really difficult to do.
Yeah. Speaking of the defence and just doing a really good job, you've highlighted this here. This was 15 minutes to go. So I think maybe 7-8 minutes before the disallowed goal. This was Celtic breaking. I think this came from Hibs had a penalty shout up the other end with Kieran Raymond going down onto Carter Vickers, and then Celtic did what Celtic do, countered very quickly. And I think what we don't see here in the clip, because it's still images, what you don't see is Rocky busting the gut to get back from the opposition penalty area whilst sort of injured. I think he's got a bit of tightness in one of his hamstrings, and he's hurpling back. Like, the best description for the run back is he's hurpling, but he is hurpling at a heck of a rate, and manages to get back.
It was a big moment, you know, on the penalty. Like, I watched it back a few times, and I actually think, like, Carter Vickers does get wrong side, and his arms are around Kurevich. I think, if I'm being honest, I think Kurevich, if he tries to just take the shot and naturally his leg hits off Carter Vickers and he goes down, I think we get the penalty. But as his arms are around him, he just sort of flops to the ground, and I just don't think it's enough for a penalty, to be honest with you. I don't know if it went to VAR for a check, if that's maybe what they would have said, but it was a crazy, 30 seconds, because that happened, and then obviously the ball gets stumped away. Jota, turns the afterburners on and goes, and I'm doing sort of Iredale a disservice here in that picture, flawing it, but he actually matches Jota for pace really, really well. He just slides, as you would on that side, he slides in with his left foot, being a left-footed player, and because of that, the ball just kind of bobbles a little bit. He's not able to kind of hook it and keep it, and it bobbles away and allows Jota to get free. But yeah, at this moment, I've highlighted Rocky, but I'll talk about Rocky, Smith, Obita, and then eventually Campbell in the clip, because in a moment like this, it's, obviously in absolute panic stations, aren't you? And if you go into that next clip, I think all three of them do really well, because he's in that position there. Obita gets back in and is sort of covering the ball into Nicholas Kuhn. Rocky is he just checks his shoulder to see where Maeda is and sort of drops and makes sure he's covering him. And I think Jordan Smith does well to just sort of stay upright and not come rushing and bailing out, which we've seen him do before. And then when you go into that next clip, obviously Jota then comes inside. Smith does well. That's the best he can do in that situation, is to try and show him in and get down low. And Rocky's positioning is just superb. He's right in the middle of the line. He's right there. I've highlighted here because now Josh Campbell has come tearing back down as well. And as Rocky makes the block, if you go into that final clip, the ball actually bobbles straight out, and it's Josh Campbell there to clear it. And you can actually see, I just noticed this now, that Rocky's about to, I think he's just made that block, and then I think he sprints over and gets a yellow card for shouting not too many nice things, I think, towards the referee. But I think if we were just summing up the team there, that was it. It was everybody, Rocky running back injured, Campbell running full length, and just that never say die attitude, which has kind of been permeating through. And listen, this is a big moment, because I think, to be honest with you, the team were kind of on the line. I mean, we'd made a few subs, like Kurevich had come on for Bowie, and I think Obita had come on for Mariah Welsh and played centre mid. The team were starting to go on to its last legs a little bit, and I think if Celtic score that goal, you're fearing that last 15-20 minutes. So a huge moment, and just epitomises the team at the minute.
Yeah, I mean, you make a good point about Campbell there. I think it's just, I think back to what Campbell said. I think this was in pre-season. David Gray been talking about how, even though Campbell himself still sees himself like a kind of younger player, he's sort of 24 now. I think he's going to be 25 in a couple of months. If I got that right. But he was talking about how Gray wanted him to take on sort of more responsibilities, almost take on a kind of leadership role. And I think he did get the armband for, I think it was maybe the second half of the Edinburgh City friendly back in June. But it was Gray was talking about him, I think, during the training camp in the Netherlands, and just saying how, because of the type of player he is, because he's got that engine on him, he's got that energy, and as you highlighted earlier, just this sort of desire and kind of never say die attitude, which we are seeing from the rest of the team as well. But wanting to see him in, he said basically, if Hibs have a chance, he wants to see Campbell in the picture of the 18-yard box, and if Hibs are defending a chance, he wants to see Campbell back in his own 18-yard box. And I think this game was like a really kind of perfect example of that in both cases. That you saw, he obviously scores the 2 goals. He had a couple of other kind of half chances, which we talked about earlier, and then in this occasion here, as you say, Rocky clears it off the line, but Maeda's lurking there. You've got Kuhn, and as you point out, Campbell's there just to kind of get a timely foot in and put it out for a corner. So I think he's certainly. I don't know. Could we still come a polarizing figure? I think there's still some fans who will be a little bit.
I mean, people know, like, we are probably unashamed. Like, I'm a fan, and I did an article, I think, for the Observer quite early on about him, saying that this had to be the season that he added goals and he added consistency and maybe a bit more in that number 10 role, getting the ball to feet and things like that. And he had a real struggle early on, and which David Gray spoke about and he spoke about as well. But obviously his attitude's been first class. He's trained really hard. He's waited for his opportunity, and now that game there was, like, for me, I mean, the goals were, like his header, then a dart through from midfield and a finish, a goal-saving clearance like this, other chances in the game as well. Like, it was the perfect, and a game against Celtic is a good game for him in terms of being, like, the way he is out of possession and the hunger, the desire, the pressing and things like that. And it's taken into these games, like against Dundee United and on Wednesday, it's then been able to match that level of performance, really. But yeah, like, a fantastic day for him, and I'm just really delighted he kind of got the headlines.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue with that. I think it's clear that you could see earlier on in the season, and especially being dropped from the squad entirely for a derby. I mean, as a boyhood Hibs fan, that must have been really, really difficult. But I think what I like is the way he's sort of, he's clearly put in extra work on the training ground. He's come back. He's keeping someone like Junior Hoylett out of the team, arguably. Which is, no mean feat when you consider what Hoylett's achieved in his career and the level he's played at and the level he's still playing at, still playing regularly for Canada international level. But I think, when you look throughout the team, there's been maybe throughout, not sort of all at once, but just sort of like, at sort of various stages throughout the sort of turnaround. You had Jordan Smith coming in and sort of bouncing back from a bit of a haphazard first game, which is to be expected given how long it had been. Without a kind of top flight, game for himself. He's just had the one game in the League Cup for Hibs prior to that. Rocky Bashiri, who couldn't get off the bench in the first sort of part of the season, is now, as we've just been discussing, a really integral part of this defensive line. Jack Iredale, again, somebody else who was, couldn't really get into the squad or couldn't get into the matchday 11 to begin with, and is now, I think, kind of going under the radar a little bit. Always sort of like, really good performances in that sort of left-sided centre-half role. And then, Campbell, like we've talked about, Nathan Mariah-Welsh as well, I think, someone who, at some point, probably towards the tail end of the last calendar year, we thought, could he be away in January? And now he's become, someone who Gray's, probably relying on a little bit more, trusting a bit more with more minutes off the bench. And then I said this probably about a week ago, and I was sort of saying there's a very good chance that Mariah Welsh may end up playing if, Newell's not deemed fit enough, if Levitt doesn't make it, and obviously with Kwon being ineligible and Manny suspended. So, I think there's been quite a few kind of redemption arcs for players, and there's probably some I'm missing. Even Martin Boyle's another one, I suppose. That sort of spell out the team, which I think probably shocked a lot of people because he thought, this is like the talisman, like surely you play him no matter what because he's got a goal in him. But it seemed to revitalise him, and I mean, again, he was very good on Saturday. Maybe not involved to the same extent as Campbell in terms of getting the headlines, but obviously puts the cross in for the second goal, and as you've discussed, a power of work in pressing up front with Kieran Bowie. I think we should spend a little bit of time talking about this. We could probably gloss over it. I mean, the game's done and dusted. Nothing to see here. But this is obviously, like, all joking aside, this has made quite a lot of headlines since the end of the game. Whether the ball was fully over the line, and if it was, how could they tell? In the end, I think the notification was that VAR had made the call on it, and it was based on a factual decision. So the referee didn't really have a say in it. That was, it was purely a VAR decision from Alan Muir.
Yeah, it's funny because I think when they I watched it, like Brendan Rodgers. When I think it was maybe Connie McGaughy, like when they told him that, he didn't look like he knew what that meant. Like he just looked like he sort of was a bit unsure about what that even meant. I guess opposite that, like a wee bit sort of further, like not directly in line with it, a little bit further away at Easter Road. So when it first happened, I genuinely thought, that's really close. It looks like it's either just out or he's slightly just kept it in. And and obviously you're just looking at the linesman, no flag. So I thought, right, well, there's no, they won't be able to probably tell exactly where it's gone out. And obviously, I've watched it back loads and loads of times in different angles and stuff. And I mean, I think it just is. And I think by the way the pace of the ball, because it's kind of like an Engels kind of overhits it a little bit, and Alistair Johnston stretching, but it is extremely, extremely close. And because we've not had the best relationship with VAR this season, I was very surprised, and I was waiting for them just to maybe release an image of it that you were like, oh, there you go, that's it. But you've just seen so many different ones going around social media. But I think we deserved that. I think let's just be honest, we deserved that a little bit of luck. And David Gray spoke about that after the game. Is you do need that in the game. You do need that little bit to go your way, and it did for us. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think there is probably an argument to be made that you do kind of make your own luck to a certain extent. Certainly when things were not going well for Hibs early in the season, they just could not get anything going their way really. Whether it was kind of penalties given and then missed, or penalty shouts turned down, or penalties given away at the other end. I mean, it's a difficult one from my vantage point in the press box, which is sort of on the halfway line, so not anywhere near in line. It looked like it had gone out before he hits it back in, but again, that's what it looks like. But it's it's extremely difficult to sort of tell from that angle, like because we've seen this in other games and other leagues, that the ball can look wildly out from one angle, but then you can get another angle that sort of tells you like, oh, it is still in play. And it was interesting listening to Johnston himself today saying that he felt that he'd just kept it in, and that he sort of puts in a lot of crosses like that from a similar area, and he was. Yeah, I mean, he's probably not going to come out and say, yeah, it was over the line. But, he was also sort of making the point and saying, like, we need to move on from it because, even after it was taken away, there was still a good amount of time for them to get an equaliser and they didn't. So I thought, quite an interesting take on it. There's obviously been, talk about goal line technology. Brendan Rodgers was sort of saying he'd be in favour of that if it sort of could give you a conclusive answer. Johnson was sort of saying likewise, but, recognising that maybe the funding isn't there in the Scottish game. But I think it's something like this inevitably is going to kind of take up a lot of headline space after the event. But
yeah,
I think it probably we shouldn't let it detract from the fact that it was overall a very good performance by Hibs, and I think you could argue if that goal had been given, even if Celtic hadn't gone on to score a winner, if it had stayed 2-2, then I think there would have been a lot of disappointment that that was it was a game that Hibs had kind of thrown away. And obviously, if Celtic had equalised, had been given, and they got the bit between their teeth, and given the amount of injury time that was added on, gone on to get a winner, that would have been a real sucker punch, and you kind of fear for. I mean, David Gray said this a lot. The players have said it a lot. You can see how quickly things can change in this league, and something like that could be just like an absolute all-timer for denting morale and for really kind of harming the collective confidence. And you can see how confident the team are sort of collectively and individually. So I think, as you say, it's the kind of thing that it's an extremely marginal decision. I think feels like at least the best way to describe it. And it's obviously good for Hibs that it's gone in their favour. And yeah, as you say, it's probably about time they got a little bit of the rub of the green when it comes to something like this. But you just it could just be sort of like a huge moment, going into what are like another big game on Wednesday night against Dundee United.
Yes.
And then the small matter of the Edinburgh Derby the weekend, this coming weekend. So
yeah, no, totally. And I think, I don't know, do we have that final clip, the final image? I don't know, not from image. I'm going to obviously credit it's Lewis Forfur's image, so I'm sure lots of Hibs fans already follow him on social media and things like that, but amazing videos and images and things that he puts out every week. So I did ask him for a bit of credit to put this up, because I sort of felt that, you were talking there about if that goal goes in and what happens in the game, but for a long time now we have not had like sunshine on Leith. I suppose both metaphorically and maybe also as well. But we've not had that chance to sing that song, and we've not had a big moment. Me and some of the fans have spoke about before that Lee Johnson's tenure was a disaster, but there was some big games and some big moments and crazy results that you had that it gave you that little buzz for a while, and then was zapped out you a few games later. But under Montgomery, we spoke about it last season. There was nothing to get excited about. There was nothing.
Yeah, no big ones.
It was just a season that you would just write off and go, nothing happened. Like nothing good happened there, apart from maybe, Marcondes and Melida coming in towards the end. But even then, not much. And that game, I was genuinely emotional at the end of that, because we've went through such a tough time that first half of the season. That game just felt so massive to get the win. The amount of effort and desire and work rate the players put in, even towards the end with the tackles that were going in, they were celebrating all the tackles. I love to see that. And then when they came over to sing there, it was just amazing. And I think that's what should take the headlines rather than this marginal decision of the ball out of play. I thought that was a good way to end it, because I think that kind of summarises just where the squad is and the connection they've got with the fans at the minute.
Yeah, and I think also how far they've come when you consider what it was like 3 months ago, I think. When you had, fans sort of offering players out in the car park and things like that. It was that bad. And we've talked about this before, the players and David Gray getting the credit they deserve. I think, they probably are now. When you consider that, to go into a game like this and to play as well as they did against Celtic, given what they've achieved already this season, given the performance, even going back to the performance against Bayern Munich in last midweek, bearing in mind that you've got, arguably a makeshift midfield, you've got a defence which is not your first choice defence at the start of the season, and you've got your second choice goalkeeper in as well, and it's just, we keep talking about this a lot, and I think we're probably in danger of saying the same things, or I certainly am, but I just think it's really quite remarkable, how, not so much the turnaround itself, but just how, so many different players have just, they look like different players, they look like different people. And I think you can really tell, that picture kind of sums it up, and, all the other pictures as well, the way they celebrate goals, like you say, they're celebrating tackles, that sort of team spirit, it just seems to be, it does sort of, it reminds me a little bit of the sort of squad in sort of 2015-16 when they won the Scottish Cup, and that was sort of bouncing back from losing the League Cup, and the way they lost in the promotion playoffs as well. Just to, with David Gray as captain, just to have those sort of all those setbacks and just to sort of come out on the other side of it for the better. You just think, that's a rare thing. You don't think you see that very often.
Because normally managers don't get the time, and I think he went almost through that adversity right at the beginning. After a really kind of positive pre-season. It was, and I think everyone's just thankful he was given the time. And he's probably, from maybe the ideas he had early on to now, things have probably changed a lot, like you say, with the different players that have come in, the change of shape, and the necessity sometimes really with suspensions and injuries. But now we've got the squad, the bench was looking really strong. Obviously, Marvin Ekpiteta came back after a long injury layoff as well, which was nice to see him back. And Joe Newell was back on the bench as well. So if you just look at it now, that squad, it looks strong. Our bench looks strong, but the togetherness, you could see that with the celebrations after the game. And I like to see David Gray. He was sort of just behind them, wasn't he? Just kind of watching it and taking it all in and stuff like that. And I think it was a really nice moment, a really good moment for the fans, a really good moment from the players. And you just kind of hope that that sort of gives them that bit between the teeth now to go and see to push for third and fourth. It was crazy because we got that result, and then everybody around us also got results. So it didn't give us any sort of advantage. It just kept us in the running, just how crazy the league's been this season. So it was a really good start to what is a massive week for the club, with things behind the scenes, but also Dundee United and the derby.
Yeah, and we should mention as well just the fact that they managed to eke out this result with Eddie May obviously having been involved in that sort of incident last week, that car crash, and being hospitalised and not being fit enough for the game. Although David Gray was saying he was on the phone constantly to the bench throughout, which doesn't surprise me in the slightest. And also I think as well, nice to have sunshine on Leith on the second anniversary of Ron Gordon's passing as well. Just one of those one of those sort of situations that quite often, football can only really do, which is, everything kind of comes together, in a kind of positive way. So, as you say, a great result, a really good start to a 3-game week, and I think really, really good given what happened in games elsewhere, as you rightly point out. But I think David Gray's due to do his pre-match press tomorrow afternoon at HTC, and I can just imagine that there'll be a little bit of chat about Saturday's game, and then it was like after the full-time whistle, attentions quickly turned to Wednesday night's game, which I think in the grand scheme of things, you could almost argue is bigger than Saturday's game, just because of where the teams are and how the games between the two teams have played out. Previously this season, especially the last trip to Tannadice. So a lot to think about in the lead up to that game, and that's even before you start thinking about the derby. But as the players and David Gray keep saying, it's one game at a time. Get that out of the way and see where you are after that. So I think we'll leave it there for today. Thank you very much for joining us. It's a really long video, so if you've stayed with us for the entire time, thank you. If you're new to the Hibs Observer, if you're new to the Tactical Breakdown videos, if you're new to our YouTube channel, please do hit that subscribe button. It will help us to keep bringing you videos like this and much more. If you subscribe, you do get notifications when we go live and when we post videos. So it would be appreciated if you could hit that button. And apart from that, just keep an eye on hibsobserver.co.uk for the latest from the club. We've got a bit more post-match analysis from Saturday's game. Liam Bryce is looking at some of the tactical stuff that we haven't covered in this video, believe it or not. So, do keep an eye on the website for more of that, and we will see you again soon. Thank you.